Hello, great souls. Welcome to our Living Yoga Satsang, Reflections on Autobiography of a Yogi. Let's take a moment to begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and Paramhansa Yogananda ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Help us to dive deeply as we study the sacred book, as we reflect upon the yogic teachings. Help us to apply the blessings, the wisdom, the treasure within these pages to our own life, and to share the divine light it offers us. It awakens within us, with all beings. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, great souls. So we are picking up where we left off last week. The chapter that we're looking at is chapter 27. The title is Founding a Yoga School at Ranchi. And I believe that we ended, I'm looking to see if it's, here we are. One of the things I ended with, so I'd like to begin with, is this beautiful prayer that Yogananda offers. And it's a prayer that we use here at Ananda in our Sunday service. We use it at other times, but it's one of the prayers that we end our time together with. And here's the prayer. It's a prayer to the divine. May thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of my devotion, and may I be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. May thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of my devotion, and may I be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. Okay, so last week what we were talking about, the first part of the chapter, a lot of what was really standing out to me is this practice of karma yoga and really listening deeply for a sense of dharma and the divine. So I'm going to mention, we have a light, and I don't know how much you can see it, but the light is kind of blinking. It's rainy today, and I don't know if that's part of it. So I'm going to ask Deepika, who's helping me with filming, if she can adjust the light. I don't know if she can. So if not, we'll keep it the way that it is, but I'm going to let her know that it's this light here on the end, and we'll see if she can shift it. If not, we'll just go with that. So with karma yoga and dharma, what I was sharing last week is this practice of listening very deeply. I think that might have done it, Deepika. This practice of listening very deeply for a soul calling regarding the work, regarding how we feel called in our life, what activity we feel drawn to. Dharma versus karma, I don't think I mentioned this last week. One of the ways to distinguish between the two is that something that's dharmic will always expand our consciousness. So in terms of the 8 aspects of the divine, light, joy, wisdom, peace, calmness, divine power, the sound or vibration of Om, and I don't know if I mentioned joy, so I don't know if I covered all 8, but there's 8 divine aspects that Yogananda said we can experience God. When we are taking action that's dharmic, one of those qualities will expand within us. And the other thing I can say is it's a feeling within yourself of expansion versus, well, what I want to say about the contraction, karma, it's not so easy to determine. So again, I'm going to say in terms of those 8 aspects, the challenge between karma and dharma, karmic in the yoga teaching is what we have done many times. So it's a thought pattern or a behavioral pattern, could also be an emotional pattern. We have practiced many, many, many times. So it builds a certain momentum, and now it will run on its own. It doesn't require very much effort at all on our part to do things that are motivated by karma. And in terms of the levels of consciousness, we have subconscious, which is not in our awareness, conscious, which we are aware of, and then superconscious, which is the highest state of awareness. Superconscious leads to samadhi, divine unity. So that is when we bring our energy here. So karma is operating on a subconscious level. It just is running, our karma, until it's complete. It has a particular momentum. Now, we don't have to be slaves to our karma. In fact, the journey of yoga is to bring awareness and sensitivity to our actions, our thoughts, our feeling life, to work with it in such a way that we're always bringing in divine energy to support us. Some other things I can say about karma, sometimes karma has to play itself out. So I can work with it, but even no matter what I seem to do, I can't change that pattern. It may be that the karmic pattern just needs to finish. That being said, I would still want to be bringing energy, divine energy, the yogic tools and practices to my life, and accepting, okay, well, this may be, I may not be able to correct that course. This can happen in a number of areas in our life. Right now, what jumps to mind for me is diet. This can happen with diet, where you have a sense of, well, I want to eat differently, but you keep encountering not being able to, right? Like, oh, darn it, I'm wanting to eat in this particular way, and then you get pulled to eat in a way that is more comforting, there can be, sometimes we don't even really know why, but other times we have a sense of why, but I still don't want to do it. Okay, so I do my best, and Swami talks about this in a number of places, but in the Raja Yoga text, he talks about with smoking, he had this experience that the pattern of smoking was very strong in him. And he knew, once it was clear to him that he wanted to live by spiritual principles, and really he was feeling drawn in the direction of becoming a monk. This is before he met Yogananda. He recognized smoking didn't fit that lifestyle. He just intuitively understood that. But it was not easy for him to stop smoking. And in the Raja Yoga book, he uses the humor of Mark Twain, who's an American author, that Mark Twain said, quitting smoking is the easiest thing I've ever done. I've done it 100 times. This is a paraphrase of his quote, meaning he quits and then starts again, right? So what Swami recognized was first self-acceptance. Okay, well, this is a pattern that's strongly rooted. But he also recognized that he wasn't going to relate to that pattern with an attitude of failure, with a sense of, oh, well, there's nothing I can do, so therefore I won't even try. That wasn't his attitude at all. He would say, I haven't quit yet. And he knew he was going to try until it was successful, until that change took hold. So that's a way of working with karma. Karma gets created in our current life and in yoga teaching in past lives. So sometimes we're aware, oh, I created that karma, I created that pattern, I got into a groove, and now it's strengthened, now it's strong. Okay, now what do I do about it? Well, in using the spiritual principles and living a yogic lifestyle, these things have divine power in them. And what we're doing is inviting light and divine energy into the situation to help us. So sometimes approaching it very directly is the right thing to do. Other times, and I'm going to say interestingly, it's more about live a yogic lifestyle, follow the yamas and niyamas to the best of your ability, surround yourself in an uplifting environment as often as you can, and those patterns will change of themselves. They will change. So it will happen. And I've seen it with friends, I've seen it with students, I've seen it in my own life, where suddenly I'm able to do something that I always knew was a good idea, but I just couldn't quite get myself to do. Suddenly I can. Suddenly, and I will say that one of my practices that is that when I recognize and I identify it as a level of willingness, I suddenly have a level of willingness to put energy in a direction I've wanted to put it before, but couldn't consistently do it. And then I have a moment, and that's what it feels like, a window of opportunity. And it's been my practice to seize it. I seize that window of opportunity, I dive all the way in, and to the best of my ability, I don't look back. And I consider it a moment of grace. That somehow, and I believe the different efforts, that I've been making have opened up, kind of cracked that door and let the divine grace come in to buoy me, to lift me towards something. And I'm full of gratitude, and I just keep applying my energy, my willpower, my intention toward that. And I do my best to not think about the future or the past, right? To just stay right in the now with it. So with karma, Asha gave a talk one time, it was very interesting to me, about karma and dharma. I don't think it was the theme of the talk, but in the talk she identified part of what I was saying is that dharma expands our consciousness. And what she said about karma, which I've been touching upon, is that it has a momentum to it. So it's very likely that we will feel attracted toward karma. We will feel, and this is what's tricky, it can feel like I want to. And well, it's not that dharma is something we don't want to do. Sometimes it is what we don't want to do. But the point here is just because I want to do it, it doesn't mean that it's the best choice for me. That might seem really obvious, but it's been my experience, it's not always obvious. There are many good choices I have found that I can make in life. And when I'm trying to discern, well, is it dharmic or karmic? Am I drawn to it because it's familiar to me? It's something that feels natural. Okay, that being karmic doesn't mean it won't have dharma, but what I look for is my consciousness. How is my consciousness impacted by this choice? That is the end of the day result that's helpful for me to know whether something, if it's expanding me, if it's helping me to grow, then I continue forward with it. And I've said this many times in these talks, I really invite close divine spiritual friends and divine teachers into the conversation when I feel that I need that. So if I'm in a place of uncertainty, I will proceed with practicing the practices. I'll use my own sense of evaluation, but then I will reach out to spiritual friends or teachers to say, what do you see? And I was talking about that, I think, last time, or to get some feedback. It really requires a deep level of trust of those friends and of those teachers that I have, usually for me, I've had some experience that it's been demonstrated to me that they are trustworthy, right? That they really are able to hold my highest and call that forth. That's part of what is said in yoga about gurus. The guru is really calling forth your divine self, your highest self. So the same thing with a divine friend or a divine teacher, that the experience is one in which afterward you feel more strengthened. So it's been said about Swami Kriyananda, I've heard people say, that sometimes he would say things that were challenging, but what the person noticed is they didn't feel diminished by it. Shanti tells a story of being with Swamiji at a gathering, I think it was a tea or a dinner, and she and her husband were there. And Swami said some things that she said, wow, you would think it would have been insulting. This was many, many years ago. He was talking about she and her first husband being very strong egos, that they're very worldly and they have strong egos. But as soon as that's not so prominent, they will, but they're great souls, is in essence. These aren't exactly the words that either he said or she said, but it was the sense. And she's spoken about this publicly, which is why I feel comfortable sharing it. The main thing that she said is, boy, you would think that that would be uncomfortable to hear, and it could feel somewhat diminishing in the company of others. And she said it didn't. It just felt completely true. He was just simply speaking truth. And she said she felt it. And she can look back, but what's interesting, she felt it at the time. So at the time, it wasn't at all offensive. It was something he was saying. And why he said it, why he felt it was important to say, I don't know. I don't know if she knows. But the idea here is that when someone is on our side, and this is some of why I've heard her talk about this story, is that there was nothing in what he was saying that was said to be hurtful. And on a conscious level, or certainly an egoic level, it could seem hurtful. She said it wasn't at all, and she believes it's because his intention was the true meaning of truth. And so in spiritual practice, non-lying, one of our yamas, has the quality of always being beneficial. And we're careful when speaking the truth to be speaking it with an intention of supporting another, supporting a situation. Fact and truth are not the same thing. Sometimes I might know information and it's not appropriate to share that information. It may not at all be welcome, or as Swamiji has talked about, there may be no receptivity to it. So one of the practices can be, if you're not sure, is asking yourself the question, am I being asked? Is anyone asking for this information? You might have the information and you feel like, is it receptive? Does someone want to hear it? And are they asking for it? And if not, then very likely it's not a good idea to share it. So we just have to find our way with that. Okay, so that's more about the Karma, Yoga, and Dharma. And moving through the chapter, Yogananda goes on to talk about, he's highlighting some interesting things about the soul's journey again with incarnation and leaving the physical body. So he begins that by talking about a deer that is part at the school. So he's got this school for boys and he's teaching yoga principles and energization he's teaching, which is a way of cosmically and consciously, with the use of the will, drawing prana and life force into the body. And it's one of the practices that Yogananda created and shared with the world. And so if you're interested about that, you can find them through Ananda. You can go on the website. You can also, I believe, Ananda Worldwide. But if you type in energization exercises, in fact, there's a beautiful meditation app that's free. And I believe it's the Ananda meditation app. I think it's just that simple. So I don't have it handy to tell you what it is, but they have wonderful resources there, including the energization exercises. So Ananda Meditation, I think, is the app. It's free, you can download it, and then if you search energization, they have it, many videos leading you through it. It's really lovely. Okay, so moving towards the deer and this idea of the soul's journey. So there's this beautiful pet deer that they have, and I'm going to find that section of it here. Okay, so he says, okay, we had many pets, including a young deer who was fairly idolized by the children. I too loved the fawn so much that I allowed it to sleep in my room. So this is Yogananda talking about the school and the animals there. And he said, at the light of dawn, the little creature would toddle over to my bed for a morning caress. One day, I fed the pet earlier than usual, as I had to attend to some business in the town. Although I cautioned the boys not to feed the fawn until my return, one of them was disobedient and gave the baby deer a large quantity of milk. When I came back in the evening, sad news greeted me. The little fawn is nearly dead through overfeeding. So then Yogananda goes on to talk about this. And he, in tears, he says, I placed the apparently lifeless pet on my lap, and I prayed to God to spare its life. Hours later, the creature opened its eyes, stood up, and walked feebly. The whole school shouted for joy. But a deep lesson came to me that night, one I have never forgotten. I stayed up with the fawn until 2 o'clock. When I fell asleep, the deer appeared to me in a dream and spoke to me. You are holding me back. Please let me go. Let me go. So this is a famous story of Yogananda's about this divine lesson of holding a soul back from its evolution. The soul of the deer came to Yogananda and let him know that it was ready to move on. It was ready to take its next step in its evolution. It's a very, very powerful story. So Yogananda accepts that and releases the deer. He allows the deer to die, which to me has always been an amazing story that he includes in the autobiography. I know I've shared in this series about over the summer, our kitty transitioned, he was ready, and it can be so hard to navigate that with pets because, well, for all kinds of reasons, but the same is true with friends, with family members, with our own self, to be able to sensitively honor the unfoldment of our soul's journey. So all of what's in the autobiography, there's all these different ways. If I sometimes think of it as a diamond with many, many facets, right? The teachings, we see it through this facet. Then we can turn it and see it through this facet. So when we're talking about Dharma and Karma, this divine, intuitive, sensitive listening of learning how to hear within ourselves and with support, how to understand what our next step is. What's the next right step? Death itself, it can bring up so much emotion, and with that, so much mental confusion that, you know, I've heard one teacher say, we practice these teachings when they're easier, so that when we're faced with the bigger challenges, we have some skill and ability to do it. It's very important because it can be quite difficult to discern when we feel emotional upset. I was teaching earlier today and talking, and here's an example of a much smaller situation. So for some reason, I don't understand. Computers can get the best of me. They can get the best of my consciousness. I'll enter into it. It'll get a little bit difficult. I won't quite know what to do. And suddenly, I'm so off center that it catches me by surprise. It truly does. So I was talking about that before a yoga class. Fortunately, I know the tools to bring my consciousness back to center, to bring it back up. One of the things that we work with agitation is to calm the whole body, the nervous system, and the heart center. And what Yogananda said is when the heart is calm, the mind becomes clear. So what's interesting is when the mind is agitated, it's the calming of the heart that will calm the mind. Now there's, again, different ways of working with it. A relaxed, slow breath, uplifted thought of affirmations. We can approach it in different ways. But the idea is that we do approach it if we want to, if we want to work with it, which I did. I didn't want to stay in that agitated state. So I was able to work with it. I taught the class, which always helps, practicing yoga, then reading, getting ready for today's talk. And there was a window of time before the talk started where I could feel intuitively, oh, I'm calm enough now. I'm calm enough now, so we could try again. And it was fine. Right? There it was. So I'm mentioning this because that's a small way of practicing the tools, a small level of agitation. Really nothing like the loss of a loved one, nothing like the loss of my own physical health. Those are much bigger. We practice with the little things so that when we get to the big ones, we're able to do it. The other thing is that we bring in these teachings in this context. Yogananda, as a highly advanced soul, right? He tells these stories because even as a master, he was in a human body and he felt human feelings. He felt what all of us feel, right? Or I will at least say many of us feel when we encounter loss. And he talks about death. As I go back through the autobiography, I am amazed at how often he talks about it. But it's really one of the hardest things for us to deal with in life is loss and change. It's part of our experience all the time, but sometimes it's more prominent than others. So Yogananda's talking about this experience of the soul of his pet coming to him. I will say I've heard other stories where I had an experience with another animal, a dear pet. We had a cat that similar kind of thing. When I felt one night, it said to me, I'm ready to go. And it really caught me by surprise, but I could feel the truth of it. I could feel, so he talks about this to give us a context of how to open ourselves to what can be very difficult to open ourselves to release someone or something. It's not always a person or an animal. Sometimes it's a situation. You can feel that situation changing. You can sense that something else is trying to happen for your, well, I will say this, I'm not always aware that it's for my own soul expansion, but it's the teaching of yoga that it is. If something else is trying to happen, there's a blessing and benefit in it on a spiritual level. So we practice listening and working with what's trying to happen. We say that a lot at Ananda. That's a phrase, that's a guideline of what is it, because we can't always know that. So later in the chapter, he talks about a saint that he introduced earlier in Autobiography. And this saint, the saint with two bodies, Pranabhananda, let me see if I have, yes, Pranabhananda passes, and he passes consciously. I'm just checking the time. I could get it in. So one of his devotees, one of his students, is telling the story of his passing. And this is something that masters are capable of doing. Advanced yogis, it doesn't have to be a master, is able to recognize the time of their death. And they know it's coming. And they can leave the body consciously. So Yogananda mentions here the second kriya, he says, a very specific technique that advanced yogis use to exit their body consciously. And Pranabhananda says to his disciple, I will return. So I'm leaving the body, I'm done. And he's saying, I want to go and rest in divine bliss. I'm going to go be nourished in divine bliss, and then I'll return, and I'll let you know when I come back. These teachings, this sharing of what is possible for us is a way to help us just go deeper and deeper in our understanding that what Yogananda said is, and what Swami Kriyananda said, death of the physical body does not touch the soul. Swami said nothing happens when the physical body, when we leave the physical body. Our consciousness continues as it is. So this is part of what Yogananda is sharing with us, and he's giving us these stories for us to begin to welcome in. And I would say this, to listen on a deep level for how they might resonate for you. What I've found about the teachings is that the truth itself has a power and a resonance. And even if I'm not all the way there with it, where I think, wow, I'm not even sure how to take that in, by being open to it, I invite the grace of the teaching in to be there for me as I am able to receive it. And over time, as I keep working with the teachings of themselves, they go deeper. They begin to integrate. I don't have to think my way into it. I simply make space for it, and the teachings themselves begin to transform me. So I offer that for you today. Those are the highlights of the rest of the chapter of continuing to work with the destiny of the soul, and how to recognize the joy in the physical release of a body. And that's really what Yogananda's highlighting here, the joy. There's a beautiful poem, I'll end with this, and I don't know it exactly, but the essence of it is that as the ship is leaving one shore, so as the physical body, as the soul leaves the life that it has known, the friends and family that it has known, those people see this ship sailing away, and there's sadness and grief of that. There goes my friend, there goes my pet, there goes what was in my life, and it's hard to let it go. But on another shore, there are friends and family and loved ones cheering, here she comes, here she comes. The new ship is sailing to that shore. So that's the essence of the yoga teachings, that we are not, when we leave the physical body, we're taking our next step, and it's a joyful step. It's a blessing. And that's why we learn to release and let go and support that. Okay, great souls. That's our chapter today. Great to be with you. Many blessings today and always.